Michael Martin, guess what? It's time for all of us to take a nap while you talk about Street Fighter.
So speaking about gods of new characters, very few people probably watched RB become this god of Urian at Red Bull Battlegrounds. Yeah, I want to talk about this lack of appeal. I think this perception I have of lack of appeal of Street Fighter V and fighting games to spectators. I think it's kind of a shame that maybe it's not growing as quickly as some other competitive games have, and I'm actually wondering if spectatorship is the problem. Numbers are always low compared to other esports, and you'd think that with games that might be more accessible, more spectator friendly, it would appeal to more viewers. But I don't feel like that's necessarily the case. We all know that sales kind of suck for Street Fighter V, so that could be a factor. But on the other hand, people are still engaged in the Capcom Pro Tour, and sales were bonkers for Mortal Kombat X, and that didn't translate to viewership for that game either. So I really think the biggest issue here is that the barrier of entry into fighting games, it's harder to pick up and play Street Fighter V and other fighting games because of the high execution ceiling compared to other games, I think. I don't know. How can we get Street Fighter V and fighting games as an esport to appeal to broader audiences?
I mean, I think it's kind of weird because, like, when you look at, say, League of Legends, it has a pretty high barrier to entry in terms of like what you have to understand about the game to even know what the hell's going on. I think it's easier to watch someone kick someone in the face, like a fighting game, be like, oh, I get that. So you would think it's easier to watch, but it might just be kind of how the markets actually work, because you play on a console, so you're not like in front of a TV or a monitor that you can put on like a second screen while you wait in queue or things like that, which you often hear about in these kind of games where, you know, Hearthstone, you're between turns, you're watching more Hearthstone. League of Legends, you're in queue, you're watching more League of Legends. And you kind of like build up this kind of following where I'm not sure if Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat, these other systems, allow you to kind of have that natural feedback loop that kind of pulls you into the viewing experience versus I'm going to play, I'm going to play, I'm going to play.
And I think it's also perhaps a bit of an issue with the way that the game is presented on stream. You know, I watch Evo, and it'll be just, oh, here's a match, here's another match, here's another match, here's a match, and it's like, and that is necessary because of how many matches are going on at any given time, especially in the group stages. But I think that's,
we call those pools in the FGC.
Excuse me, pools, my bad. So especially in pools, to get the term correct, but I never get to really know any of the players until they get to the top 8. Once they hit the top 8, then they're like, oh, we know, this is L.I. Joe. This is who this guy is. But before that, I have no, unless I've been watching the FGC for years and years and years, I have no connection to any of these players. And I think that is a solvable problem. You can get it to the point where, you know, the FGC is starting to highlight specific players and saying like, oh, this guy, we should do a small feature on him, and you know these tournament organizers can start doing that. I honestly think that that's a pretty big issue because you know who knows a bunch of players outside of like the top 5 best in the world.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have a big question too, because like, what does like the average streamer for these games get on Twitch? This kind of bouncing between both of our points, where like in League of Legends, the biggest streamers are also pros most of the time.
Or former pros,
and they get like tons of viewers daily. Whereas like one of the things I always see with these kind of fighting game communities is that they rarely have people who are online that pull big numbers. Like a tournament will get, you know, like 50, 100K, somewhere between there, but the average viewer base on a day-to-day basis is tiny. And I think it kind of pulls into that idea, like people don't expect to go and watch games all the time, whereas League of Legends players are like, what's on Twitch right now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think also part of it is like fighting game matches are over so quickly, so it's easy to miss them if you don't really paying attention as well. And you know, that it perplexes me a lot because like fighting games should be the most successful like viewing experience. Yeah. Like they're so easy to understand, and there's like so much hype that happens as well when you're paying attention to these stories. But I think honestly the players, like they just need to like give better context for who's behind these players and the stories that are happening, like the rivalries and like all the states that are like warring with each other. So you know, that's something that I'd like to see more of, and I think that's kind of what's preventing the fighting game community or the fighting game scene from like kind of breaking that barrier and going up to like, you know, League of Legends level or Dota 2 levels of kind of spectatorship.
Well, I feel like participation, and maybe Mark, this is kind of to your point too. Participation is a big issue here too. When you talk about streaming, you know, unless maybe you're like Justin Wong, I'm guessing most FGC streamers, even, you know, popular players, probably aren't pulling in huge numbers, right? But I just kind of wonder when you think about things like sales, like Street Fighter 5 sales and like this barrier of entry, when you have games that are tougher to sort of get into, you mentioned it. It's like you have to have a console, you have to have a setup when you go to an event, you have to have, you know, controllers, joysticks, whatever, fight sticks. If that contributes to like this, the accessibility to, you know, the average Joe of getting into fighting games, even if it's just spectating, even if it's just watching, does not, you know, having an invested interest in playing these games contribute to that?
And how much do the developers push it? Because like Riot will put like match happening now in their client, and they have like, you know, 50 million
That's
people
another
online.
issue.
Like, let's tune in.
Yeah.
And I don't know if not only do the developers.
I could say none. That for fighting games, that's pretty much none, nothing, and that's an issue too.
Right. So like, if someone doesn't know about esports, how do they find out? Aside from they themselves being like, hey, I want to look up the best player at this character. You're not like, there's no education going on that like reaches them unless they're already in the scene, kind of.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think at the end of the day, as we run out of time here, I think I agree. I think the FGC fighting games should be the biggest spectator thing in the world because they're so easy to watch. But you know, I think it really comes down to players getting their names out there and developers making sure that the players are getting out there.